What's up, guys? I'm Alchemist. We got Boris, and we got again with us the CrossAI with another episode of Big News, where again we're just going to talk about the latest and greatest things that are happening in the meta, and it's a very interesting one today. We're going to go ahead and start with the TAC Melbourne regionals. I believe it's a Australia regional, and they completed their tournament with having 250 players, so kind of a small tournament, but the turnout was very interesting on how the top 16 shook out and how the total leaders ended up shaking out. So for the top leaders, we got Katakuri at 59, Zoro at 32, Law at 30, and Newgate at 26, which is absolutely insane. And Law ended up taking the tournament, which is to me is no surprise. But as we saw in the Knoxville regional, Whitebeard basically destroyed everybody in its path and took a lot of the top spots. And in this one, in the top 16, we only have two Whitebeards making it to the top 16, while four Laws made it to the top, which is pretty amazing to see for this meta. I feel like a lot of people thought that NA was going to lead the charge in deciding on how the meta was going to shake out and what people were going to play. But as you can see, Australia does not give a crap about what NA is doing, and only 26 brave souls decided to take Newgate, and it looks like it actually wasn't that great of a pick. What do you think about this, Boris? This shakeout?
I think like we talked about back in Knoxville, it was kind of the first tournament for the set. People were saying Katakuri was going to be probably the most represented, just because a lot of people had been waiting for kind of the set to really go hard with Katakuri. Law was up there as well, and so people thought Whitebeard was dead. Turns out it's not dead, and a lot of people weren't prepared. I know I wouldn't have been prepared for that much Whitebeard if I went to Knoxville. I would have expected a lot less. So I think seeing just how dominant it was at Knoxville, I think Cross, you've been getting some practice in, with some of the different matchups. People are starting to lab Whitebeard again. I think some people had maybe disregarded it, and maybe people are just more prepared now with the matchup. And I think also the other thing is people got caught off guard by the Red Hawks. A lot of people were playing for Red Hawks, and so that maybe caught a few people off guard. They weren't playing around it. So now that they know that those are in the deck, they'll know to be careful for those.
So Cross, what do you think about Law finally taking its spot? I know you put Whitebeard as an S tier deck, and it seems that Australia doesn't care about your opinion and thinks that Katakuri is the best deck, as it pretty much it doubled the amount of Newgates. There was, I guess, to bring up a side thing too, there was a Smoker that made it in there and a King, and also an Ace. And even though there was an Ace there, a lot of Laws made it to the top. And so what do you think is your input? Is Whitebeard not as good as we think it is? Or, what do you think is going over in that meta?
So I think Whitebeard's still very good. So in my tier list, actually, I made the tiers with the caveat. I said that I put Whitebeard at the top of S mainly because I thought it was still going to be the most represented. So I just thought it had a lot of power in numbers, which I still think is kind of true. I still think it has good power in numbers. But like, I was expecting like the other decks like Law, Zoro, and Katakuri top performing, or I was expecting that prior to Knoxville at least. So I started testing Whitebeard recently, and I do think Whitebeard is still like pretty much the best deck or close to it. I just think it's harder to play than last set. So I think that plays a huge role in these results here. I don't know do we know if Whitebeard was the most represented deck? Oh wait, no, this is the total amount. I thought this was only top 32.
No, that's what I'm saying. There was only 26 out of 250. So
That's
this is
wild.
what I'm saying. Like a bunch of people do not think that it was even an appropriate deck to bring to a tournament like this, and basically chose to go with every other deck in the S tier except even like there was more green purple Doflamingo than there was Whitebeard. So it's
But
just
they
like
still got two people in top 16, so as opposed to Katakuri, where there are 59 players and only 3 made top 16. So I think that kind of shows you the power of Newgate,
I feel like a huge part of it is the tournament being 250 players. I do still think Whitebeard's 100% S tier deck, but with it being 250 players, I can kind of see like how it can be kind of random like that. Because when I'm going to the tournament, I'm thinking that either Whitebeard or Katakuri is probably going to be the most represented or going to be the top two. I mean, in this case, Whitebeard is the fifth most represented, which is like
Mind-boggling,
kind of
right?
surprising. But like at 250 players, I can kind of see how that happens. So I do kind of want to chalk it up to it being 250 players. I would like to see what it would be like if there was like like 512 or 1,000 people. But I mean that is kind of surprising. Like if the tournament is going to be smaller, I guess it kind of makes sense to like bring decks you think like would beat Whitebeard. But Katakuri
But
being
that's
at
not it,
59 is
right? Katakuri's not
that's
it
wild.
though.
Yeah, I don't know. That's wild to me. I think I'm more like yeah, I think it's very shocking to see 59 people bringing Katakuri while only 26 brought Newgate. I think that's like almost literally just incorrect because I don't know if you looked at the first place Law's results, but he steamrolled through like 5 Katakuris. Now I'm trying to like I'm looking at like top 1 through 16, and like I'm just wondering how many of these people just like steamroll through like a bunch of Katakuris. Like, all right, honestly, I think it's just due to being a small amount of players because there's no way you only have 26 Whitebeard, but you have 59 Katakuri. Like,
Well, we're gonna have to
I
take
don't
a
know if there's an
second
explanation
to point out that
as
Cross just
well.
said the entire Australia meta is incorrect on what they want
No,
to
no, no,
bring
no,
to a
no, no, no,
tournament.
no,
I'm just playing. I'm just playing.
no, no,
No,
no.
but what is actually crazy, and I guess we'll move the point, is Ace good now because of all the Law that are coming in. Law does so good. Law did crazy at this tournament because of the lack of Newgate. It had all the best matchups, right? Like your chance to run into a Katakuri are so incredibly high. I think we did see one guy post on Twitter that like 5 out of his 7 rounds was Katakuri. I think it was
That's the
Jelly
first
Beans.
place player, I think. Wait, oh no, you're talking about somebody else. That was also the first place player. Also, literally played like 4 or 5 Katakuris, but you might be talking about somebody else. Yeah, I know who you're talking about.
So I think that stuff is absolutely insane. And I guess the last thought, since I get to be here for a second, is what do you guys think about King poking its head again, as doing something? What do you guys think about King?
Wait, where?
King got in. Okay, there's a unique 6-2s, and it
No,
says
I
that,
see it.
that King got 26th place. We're not surprised about Nami. Smoker is pretty surprising, but maybe not at 250. But what about King getting 26th?
I guess from my point of view, is there a reason to run King over Kaido? Is he just trying to meme, or is King actually like better
the meme
leader?
is real. It's not a meme if it actually works, right? Like once he manifests
Because
as a meme.
I was my friend, he's a Kaido main from set 1. He's kind of getting back into the game, and he was trying out Kaido like last week, and I just got a few games against him, and 10 drop is still good. 10 drop can still, especially if you're playing a deck like I was playing Dofi, so a deck that kind of swarms the board. 10 drop is still really good, and if you don't have that double attack from Kid like we did in set 1, you can all of a sudden snowball, and then the 9 drop is still incredibly powerful as well. So
people aren't ready. I think people are like, what kind of practice would you have? Like you would step in, you'd be like, oh crap, I'm gonna get 10 dropped, and you wouldn't know what else they had in their deck.
Probably good surprise factor for sure. I think
like that. It would be so good. And
also, I've definitely lost to the Hell's Judgment trigger before, which I believe minuses at one of your Dawn. Yeah. So when I play against purple, sometimes I'll usually I'll play my big drop before I even attack, just so that I guarantee don't waste my turn. Because like if I'm at 10 Dawn and I attack and they trigger it, then I go down to 9 and I can't play my 10 drop Dofi. So yeah, it's definitely something to watch out for.
Yeah, there actually is something I want to say regarding that. So in my tier list, I do always put King at F and stuff like that. But I think, okay, this might be a hot take, but I think in reality, while I don't know where I would place King, I do think King is technically higher than F. Because like, here's the thing, right? So if we can recognize that Kaido's higher than F, I think we can recognize King is also technically like kind of higher than F, because Kaido's leader ability is basically like, I would argue it's just like not that effective anymore, but we still recognize that the Kaido deck is at least good enough because you can play Onigashima and stuff like that. So King is able to also play Onigashima like Kaido. I think it's technically better than F. I don't know where I'd put it, but I think it could I think if you took King and Kaido to the same tournament, I would expect them to like result the same because like it's whatever. It's just like you're basically just playing the benefit of playing like King or Kaido right now is just that it's a 5 life leader that can play Onigashima because both their leader skills are kind of like King giving -1K might be like relevant at times, but that's not really ever coming up. And then Kado's burn skill just
Maybe it's good against
it's been
Whitebeard.
lacking
Since you're
recently.
minusing,
I don't
they're
know.
easier to kill. Maybe it's good against Whitebeard or something.
But
I don't
yeah,
know.
to
It's leader
Cross's
skill
point,
just
the
yeah.
Onigashima, man, you just got to draw it every game, and
That's
then
true.
you're
This
good to
was a
go.
really
Yeah.
small tournament, so it's like if you only had to hit it 7 times, that's way better than having to hit it 10 times. That's
Yeah.
that's insanely better odds. So that's what I thought was super interesting there. Probably same deal with the smoker. Small amount of rounds. People aren't ready for it. You got to be an OP-01 nerd to be ready for smoker, and then you just randomly get bodied by it. To move into the next subject, which is also extremely interesting to me, we have the Latinum offline regionals that happened before the TAC, but had more players. This had 512 players, and this one is super interesting because there was only 3 spots for Newgate in the top 16. 5 laws this time, so we're actually almost seeing the same results from the TAC pasted over to the Latinum, but with the double the sample size. And another super interesting thing is that if you look at the top 32, there was actually 10 Newgates that made in the top 32. So that means all these guys just ate it at the end, or they had the worst tiebreakers. But I don't know what happened to these other 8 Newgates, but none of them were able to advance any further, and they all got destroyed by their opponents. While half the law pool actually made it in, which is also crazy. So I think my kind of deduction from this is that maybe this region is better against Whitebeard than NA is because they didn't let any of them through. Maybe the decks are teched better for it. Like, these results are super interesting because my opinion is that Whitebeard is just not that good. It's just a knowledge check that everybody fails. And these results are kind of almost saying that if you do have the knowledge to beat Whitebeard, you can do it because this region was able to knock out 80% of the Whitebeard population while half the law population went through. What do you think about this, Boris?
Yeah, like I mentioned earlier, I think people are more prepared now for Whitebeard. I still think it's like an incredibly powerful deck, and sometimes even in good matchups, I feel like I just like, wow, like Whitebeard easily wins sometimes, even though it's supposed to be favorable. So, if anything, one of the things that's kind of shocking me is every law deck I've been seeing top is playing some sort of Nico Robins, which I think has historically been bad against Whitebeard. Although I'm not sure, I think it's more maybe better aimed for Zoro matchup and stuff. So the fact that there's all these laws, and all that the Whitebeards aren't doing as well, even though the law players are playing Nico Robin, kind of makes it a little bit interesting. I don't know. I'm not a law expert. Cross, you could probably fill me in your thoughts on Nico Robin, but I think both of the top 2 here and then top 2 at the other regional were all playing Nico Robin.
I think the second place one oh wait, no, it did. Okay, yeah, continue.
Yeah, so I just I don't know.
These results are ridiculous. Like the amount of like little things that got through. Like two green purple Dofis were in the top 32, and both of them made top 16. Both the Crocodile, the Rebecca, and the Kid all made it through. Yeah, I'm a little lost at this one. What are you thinking, Cross?
So aside from like there being less Whitebeard than I expect, which is still like kind of weird for me, but I'll touch on that later. These results, like Whitebeard aside, I think they like kind of make sense. I do like the Lawless with the Robin because I think while I think Robin's kind of mediocre against Zoro, I do think that it is very strong against the mirror match, and it can catch certain decks off guard if it sticks. So that's huge. So I think Law getting first, like in a meta like this, Law getting first place just makes sense. Like you're smoking Crocodile, you're smoking Katakuri. There's no Zoro, which I also think is kind of strange. I do think there should be more Zoro, but Zoro's like harder than a lot of people give it credit for. Like I think if there were better Zoro players in all regions, I think we would be seeing a lot more Zoro. But without Zoro and with Whitebeard being like with there not being any like much Whitebeard, I think Law just kind of cooks. So Law cooking in both these regionals makes sense. I'm still a little surprised by Kata, but I was just texting the winner of Australia on Twitter because I was wondering. I was like, yo, why is there so many Kata Curry? Because you were just talking about it. And he said in Australia they say Kata goes 50-50 into Whitebeard as of OP-04, which I do think the matchup got a lot better. So I'll give a little bit of credit to that. And then he said Kata is also kind of 50-50 into Zoro, which I agree with as well. I mean,
Mhm.
outside of Whitebeard, Law, and Zoro, I think Katakuri beats most decks for the most part. So I guess that's good justification for why there's so many Katakuri. I just don't get why there's so little Whitebeard or why the Whitebeard's like performing so low. Like,
Do you think they have like a lower opinion of it, or like do people just hate playing that deck? Like I just can't think of a reason why people wouldn't take. I guess people have more fun playing Katakuri. I don't have no idea why there's not more Whitebeard. Like it's just like a tough reasoning thing. But
I mean, yeah, it's also like one last thing. I guess it's also still technically the beginning of the set. We're like 2 weeks in, 3 weeks in, or whatever. So people still testing out the new stuff. They want to play something new. I think a lot of the Whitebeards we saw do well at Knoxville were kind of like the more veteran players, the people who usually top. So they're kind of used to playing just whatever's best. But maybe over there they just kind of just wanted to try out some of the new cards or try the new updated Katakuri. But as time goes on, as the format progresses, people slowly migrate to what are actually the top decks or whatever. So that
well,
might be one reason.
well, this brings me to my next subject, which I'm kind of excited to talk about too. Is are we in like the golden age of One Piece now, where Law is actually one of the hardest decks to play, is finally seeing all the wins with Whitebeard out of the picture and Katakuri not like, I guess, winning as hard. I guess if more people gravitate to Law, I feel like there'll be less Katakuris topping, and it'll force people to play Rebecca, which is arguably the hardest deck. So now we have this meta where people are forced to play like the two best or the two decks with the highest skill cap. And is this the golden age of Law? Like, is Law finally just like absolutely going to dominate in the future? What do you think, Cross, is our local Law expert? How do you think Law is positioned in this meta going forward, especially winning both these tournaments?
I think Law's positioned to, like, regardless of how the meta changes, I think it's positioned to be like a top two, top three deck for the entire format. As long as Rebecca isn't as popular, I think Law's the best deck. Even if Zoro raises in popularity, if like the good Zoro players come out of the woodworks, I still think it's still close to being the best deck. Because I think Law versus Zoro, I think it's like I honestly think it's 50-50 rather than like it being disadvantageous if you're good at it, which that's something I didn't acknowledge in oh man, that's something I didn't acknowledge in OP-03, but after testing it some more, I think it's 50-50. But if Rebecca gets more popular, then I think it gets a little worse than the best deck. But the thing is Rebecca's so hard to play, and like you're still gonna be worried about.
Yeah.
I mean, most Rebecca players can't handle yellow. They're gonna get clapped up by blue. That's the worst matchup. So I think Law's position to be like the best deck in this format so far, and I think that's gonna change. The only things that I'm really expecting to change is I think that I think I think like Strawbeard might take over some more. I think that people might experiment with Strawbeard some more. Maybe find like a better list or a better build that's better into the meta. Then I think maybe we'll see more Whitebeard. But that's like the main change I'm really expecting for the time being. Law's gonna continue to be the best. Uh, Category might see less representation due to Law being the best, and then I think Whitebeard should rise back up. I don't know, but we will see
Well, I guess
what
kind of
happens.
my question, just as a side note, is that if Law was the most represented deck at tournaments, do you think that's the best version of the meta we could have in OP-04? Like, what's your ideal? Because in my head, it's like, okay, this deck actually has like a reasonable skill ceiling, and that's what people complain about Whitebeard is like, oh, it's so easy to play, blah blah blah. But if everybody was forced to play Law, that would force everybody to have to play a way more complex game on average at a tournament.
I guess the one thing about that would be how much skill is in the Law mirror. And I think the thing about the Law mirror is you have to think about like there's the three different scenarios, right? One is they both draw Bonnie, one is one draws Bonnie, one doesn't draw Bonnie, and then one is neither draws Bonnie, right? Whereas with Whitebeard, because it's such a consistent deck, the mirror match is pretty much going to go the same every game. So you can kind of master that. Whereas with the Law mirror, I'm not sure how it could be really skillful. Again, I don't have that much experience, but you do have to kind of play a sub game, which is first off, do I draw Bonnie? Did my opponent draw Bonnie? So that's kind of like a first sub game you have to play, and then after that, then you kind of when the actual technical skill comes in.
So are you saying that the law matchup, do you think it's going to introduce more RNG into the
I don't know. That's the thing.
Average? Like this is
it might.
I think I'm on the fence about this. Like I have no idea. What do you think, Cross?
Yeah.
I think it will kind of introduce more RNG. I think the law mirror match is very skillful if both players draw well, but I mean that requires both players drawing well, right? So that's like the biggest thing. I think if law players are drawing well at the top tables, I think it'll be very interesting because I think the better player wins the mirror on average when they both draw well. It's just it's a matter of them both because you can kind of outdraw your opponent in the mirror match. I think that the law decks running Robin is good. I think that gets rid of like part of the variance. I think it gives you like it just gives you like another card that's like searchable that can deal with the opponent's board and stuff like that. So I think Robin definitely helps with like the RNG in the mirror match, but at the end of the day, I do think it's pretty RNG. I think if your opponent like outdraws you by too big of a margin, that you'll kind of just get clapped up. But if it's even, then I think it's very skillful. So I think it's kind of RNG. I'm gonna be honest.
Like the deck itself, it's just hit or miss. You're either gonna have an amazing match, or you're gonna see the most one-sided BS like whatever match where one guy just like gets destroyed.
Yeah, honestly, if Law becomes too popular, I honestly would just take Rebecca. You'll probably just see me playing Rebecca.
That would be the most fun tournament of all time. Just like clapping up Laws and Zoros.
Yeah, that'd be fun.
Well, it's kind of interesting to see actually the meta progress. And I guess that kind of like pushes us into our next subject, talking about meta progression. We got this 3v3 in Mexico, which had the craziest results in terms of who won it. The winner comp was a Kinemon, a Rob Lucci, and a Katakuri, which none of those guys are on my top 3 leaders to take to this thing. I said it last week. I thought it was cut and dry that pretty much everybody would just take Zoro, Law, Whitebeard. But I guess these guys heard the news and then like, we'll just play the counter to at least 2 of those. Like, I feel like when we had Jackson on, he was actually talking about how he thought that Rob Lucci was one of the sleeper decks that really could actually do something when nobody was playing it. And like usual, he somehow was right. Like, I don't know what this guy's record was or his matchups, but to take Rob Lucci and have it tested enough into this meta and know it would work is like pretty impressive. I don't really know much about like why these team comps did so well. Like, what do you guys think of why this team comp managed to take it?
I can start. Well, first off, the Lucci player has like a fully maxed out deck with the admirals, like the prize admirals. So obviously this guy's like an expert. I think I've seen him on either on stream or in a YouTube video from a previous Mexico event. So I think this guy's been playing. If it's the same guy I'm thinking of, he's been playing with the deck and kind of has mastered it. Like we've seen with some other players like Jonas and Clay. So in a 3v3 event, when you kind of want kind of the teams depending on you to win, it's not a bad idea to bring a deck you're comfortable with, especially if it's a good deck. Again, it's not a top tier deck, but double attack actually right now I think could be really good. I think. A lot of decks are playing blockers and kind of depending on those to survive until late game. And Lucci all of a sudden, started double swinging and take the game out of nowhere.
Picking Lucci just says like, man, I can't wait to play Whitebeard. That's like the main reason you would take Lucci, right? Like,
Whitebeard has a hard time when you're killing all their dudes. That's for sure.
What is Kinemon
I just don't see why Lucci over Rebecca. I just still don't get it. I guess maybe Lucci has a better yellow matchup than Rebecca, I guess. So I guess that's like the main incentive there.
Does it though?
No, you gotta flex the admirals. That's what you gotta flex.
You think he's doing it just because that's his main deck?
I don't. Yeah. I think he's just doing it because it's his main deck. I'm just saying that. I think that's probably the main reason. But I just know that from Clay, Lucci does technically have a better yellow matchup than Rebecca, from what I understand. But I'm pretty sure he just like chose Lucci because that was his black deck of choice.
Man, that shit is wild. Yeah. And then I guess like
a big mom. Let's talk about the Katakuri deck. It's so weird. Like it's definitely different numbers than we're used to. Like 3 Peros, 3 big moms,
3 Thunderbolts, 3.
Just a 3 of 3 of everything except for Katakuri. Katakuri has 4. So I know a lot of people like to run 2 to 3, but he's using 4. It's kind of like I think he's kind of relying more on that as his win condition than Big Mom. Using Big Mom kind of as like a nice finisher if he needs it. But yeah, again, with these numbers, when someone runs a deck and has like all these weird odd numbers, it makes me think that they've tested the deck a lot and played around with the numbers, and they've done a lot of testing. So probably put a lot of time into this one. And
Well, this is another deck that's like, I would say reasonably teched for Whitebeard because he's got the 2/4/6s and he's running his largest amount of vanillas is the 6/8. So I think all these guys were pretty ready to play against Whitebeard. It seems like, at least what I've been saying is that the easiest way to beat Whitebeard is just to have your deck teched for it because their game plan doesn't really change. So if you can see the cards that are good against it, then the Whitebeard is kind of like dead in the water.
Oh, I guess I think Will to Win was there that weekend with Impact and DD.
Oh, he was.
Yeah,
he got fifth.
I believe he was on Kata. I believe he ended up playing Kata that event.
Yeah, they put Impact on Law. It was DD on Whitebeard and Will on Kata.
Okay. Shout out to Guillermo Aganar, which I think is what they call him in Spanish. But yeah, so if you're thinking about playing in the 3v3 this weekend, maybe Kata might be a choice of people playing it. So
well,
if you ever have a teammate on Whitebeard, so.
Any more thoughts on this, Cross? You're blown away.
I'm just shook. I mean, like, I can kind of because I've been texting Jeremy after talking to him a little bit more, like I kind of understand like the popularity in Kata and the decrease in Whitebeard. I think the biggest change in Whitebeard is I think Whitebeard's still very strong. I just think that maybe it takes like a little more I think it just takes a little more skill now. So I think that either the good Whitebeard players are gonna keep on doing well, like Kevin Zhao, for instance, he literally back-to-back tops like between OP-03 and OP-04 with like Whitebeard, and he changed up his list and stuff, and he's only getting better with the deck. So I think that if Whitebeard players get better, it'll start performing better again because now there's like real decks that can beat Whitebeard, right? Like you have Crocodile, Dolphingo, stuff like that. So I think that's just going to be dependent because I feel like the majority of Whitebeard players they've probably just been cruising, right? It was so easy to win with the Whitebeard last set, but now they got to put in more effort. Man. Oh wait, sorry, my bad. No, you're good, but that's most.
I'm just kidding.
Yeah, no. I think that's fun on that. I think Kata for the time being, which this is why I was making so many Whitebeard videos briefly early on in the meta. I was expecting Kata to be like the new Whitebeard. Like, I think Kata is just like it's so strong and it's easy. Like, sure, there's like some decisions, but it's easy. I would argue that Kata is easier than Whitebeard right now.
Yeah, I don't want to get into that because obviously, it's the only deck where you actually don't have to play any cards because you can hit the right cards out of life and just win. Like you actually don't know how to play the game at all.
It's weird.
Like you don't even have to count. Like you don't have to count to 10. Like you literally.
You don't got to defend in a special way. Like you don't got to do. Like I feel like I deadass think Kata might just be like easier than Whitebeard, and it has like such a good like matches spread in the meta right now. Aside from losing to what's seeming to become the most popular deck, Law. Outside of that, which. Bro, you can sack them too. You can potentially sack Law and beat Law as well. So, I do kind of see. I wouldn't be surprised if Kata continues to be the most represented deck while people are still getting better at Whitebeard. And it is true, Kata definitely got way better into Whitebeard, which was one of its worst matches. But I don't know. I think it's just up to the Kata and Whitebeard representation right now. And then.
Yeah, because the Whitebeards can knock out the Laws that would otherwise knock out the Katas, but like we were saying before, it's basically a field day for Law at this point. But I'm not going to lie, the meta, those other two metas are way closer to what I thought everything was going to end up looking like, as opposed to how it shook out in Knoxville. Because when I
do agree with that. Yeah, I do agree with that.
Like, these charts make way more sense to me. Like, and the representation makes so much more sense. But I guess to round out to our last subject of the day, how is Green able to fight in this? We see I saw a kid at the TAC tournament get top. No, it was at the LATAM tournament. A kid made it, and then we just talked about this Kiamon. Why does Green fit into the meta right now? Because I'm not a Green player. I know Boris has all his tops with Kid right now. So as with a Kid mind, why do you think that Green fits into the meta right now?
So I've been doing some theory crafting, and I was telling you that I think I was trying to find a way to play the 4-cost Yamato. I think in general the card has been the most powerful card for me that I've played throughout the game so far. People just underestimate how much of a tempo swing it is to be able to play a 6-cost threat and tap an opponent's character that I can attack with my leader with. And
Yeah.
I love playing tempo like that. That's my style, right? So that in terms of how I like to play the game, that card is in my opinion like my favorite card. And so I was trying to figure out I was actually thinking about, man, is there a way to fit Kinemon in? I was thinking I was going more in the direction of playing Corazon and using his on-play ability to get a Yamato out, or like an X-Drake or a Hawkins. But the problem with Corazon, it's just not it. Every time I use it, it's a one-time effect. It's not like 8-drop Kid where you can do it every turn, and it's just not as good. It has to be a green 5-drop, and it's just very restrictive. So I couldn't get it to work. Somehow, again, this is a 3v3 tournament, so in theory, this guy could have lost every round, and his teammates could have won every round, right? I don't know what record this guy went. But it is interesting. I have been theory crafting, and I think back to your question, I think just tapping things right now is really good. The ability to just tap your opponents, guys. You have X-Drakes for the Whitebeard matchups to be able to KO their 4-drop. Of course, like I said, Yamato's a 6K, so naturally hits into Whitebeard.
Yeah.
I think going back to the last format, I'm not a big fan of Yamato. A lot of time, I mean, it's good. Don't get me wrong. The 5-cost Yamato, the banished double strike, it's good. It's just every time I would play it, it would get killed right away.
Everybody loves this card. I gotta understand.
Well, here's the thing: if you're expecting
bro.
Whitebeard, right?
Yeah.
It doesn't really do much into Whitebeard, so it's kind of a dead card. But that said, it is really good into yellow, and they have to waste either a Thunderbolt or you can stack it up, and then if they don't trigger.
Even then, what about Film Kid? Film Kid did good too, so it's like a whole like green thing, right? Like,
Film Kid is different. Film Kid is one of the few kind of aggro decks in the game. So you have like Zoro, and then I consider Film Kid an aggro deck because you're playing Film Brooks into Usopp. So early on you're flooding the board, and very few decks can contend with 3 or 4 5K swings every turn. It's kind of like Zoro Law how they can like play Zoro attack leader, shambles, bounce Zoro, play back Zoro attack. So all of a sudden they're doing 3 or 4 5K swings, and even though they're only 5K swings, that's a lot of cards you have to pitch every turn. That's the same thing with Film Kid, is that they just flood the board, and unless you can deal with the board, they're gonna attack you. I think the problem is that I think just that a lot of times you'd rely on kind of your big guys to end the game, like a Film Luffy or like 8-drop Kid, and now with the inclusion of Red Rock, that kind of just makes things very difficult to win from that perspective. But
well, I guess the other question is, 10-cost Dofi just that good too? Like, is that like high tier?
Yeah. I think it's really strong. It's not searchable, like.
It beats Whitebeard, right? Like 2.
Very strong,
I think you need 2, right? But it pretty much beats Whitebeard for the most part, right?
It's really good against Whitebeard, yeah. I think again, when I'm looking at this Kinemon deck right here, just again, one of the advantages that Kid has is that you can pitch dead cards, right? So if you draw 2 Dofis, a Kid, and an Odin, you don't need all of those to win the game, right? So you can pitch it to get an activation. Whereas with this deck, I mean, there's not really much to do if you do draw like a bunch of bricks, right? So that would be my fear, but
so
I'm definitely going to be testing it out.
I guess my question for Cross is, do you think that green is underexplored, or is this just like a miracle finish that just comes with the variance of matchups in card games?
So I think my answer mainly depends, because I don't know if green is how strong 8-cost Kid and Kinemon is into yellow and Crocodile, so that'll probably mainly influence my answer. But for the time being, I think green is a little unexplored, but I don't know how much potential I think it has, because if Law is the strongest deck right now, I think you struggle into Law.
Yeah.
I think if
Law's always been one of the worst matchups for green. So as long as Law is the number 1 deck, I see it having a hard time. Even the Tappers, you might think Tappers is good against Law, and it is, but a lot of times it's not enough, and they can just overwhelm you anyways. So.
Yeah, I'm curious to see how Kenny and 8-cost Kid are into yellow and blue. I know that I think Film Kid, while Law was less popular, I think Film Kid was underrated. There's a Japanese player named Kai. He makes a lot of English content. Very good player. He's been like a Film Kid Cobra, but I've seen him have crazy results against decks that aren't Law. So I guess I think that's a little unexplored in English. But once again, if Law is gonna become this much popular, I just don't know if it's even worth experimenting with, because I think you're just going to struggle into law players. I think at that point, if you're going to play a green deck, you have to try to improve grip with OP because it probably has the highest chance into meta with like law and stuff like that. But I don't know. I mean, I'm curious to see what happens with it. I explored green briefly and I played against it with
If
on.
you're
I was
only
like,
Yeah,
okay,
like yeah.
so I guess just to put on a side subject before we sign off. So Law being like the second hardest deck, is it one of those things where you just say, screw it, if Law is my hardest deck, Law beats everything if they see the nuts. It doesn't even matter. So I have to see a good Law player that knows how to play the deck, and that's what's going to beat me. You know, at that point, is it almost worth taking? Or I guess you guys are saying
if
that
it can
now,
be blue and yellow, yeah. If it can be blue and yellow, then I think
yeah.
yeah.
And then it's looking like, I guess on the final subject, it looks like there's just a lot more Law at these top tables, and those guys are generally pretty good if they're all the way up there.
Yeah, right now, to Cross's point, I would not play a deck that doesn't have a good matchup, or at least a 50-50 into Law, or like, because like, what's the point, right? You're gonna probably play Law. Whereas, you know, last formats, it was good, but I don't think it was seeing as much representation as it is now.
Or Nami.
So
I wanted Nami to live.
yeah, we have a lot of Nami players that are locals.
It's been more dead than ever. Nami, the dream is over. But with that, that's going to do it for us. Thanks, everybody, for watching and listening. Follow Cross's Patreon. Let's get those numbers up. We got to pump his Discord. We got to pump his numbers up. Let's join that Patreon for some of the best articles you can read and pretty much one of the best takes on the game, at least in my opinion. So go follow that and follow all us on Twitter. Peace, guys.
See y'all.